So this will be the first entry into the Monday videos, and this specific section of the Monday videos, which will be for the next couple weeks, will follow Harry versus Percy. Harry Potter versus Percy Jackson. So the way the schedule is going to look is going to be like this. And what it basically means is that, for example, this week I'll be doing the first Percy Jackson book, and then the week after I'll be doing the first Harry Potter book, and then the week after that I'll be comparing Percy and Harry Potter's first book. And I do know there's 7 Harry Potter books and 5 Percy Jackson books, so the schedule will explain exactly how these videos are going to come up. And so this specific video, the first video of this series, will be Percy Jackson. So just to recap what the introduction section is going to look like, it's just going to follow the beginning of the story until when the story really quote-unquote begins. So for the introduction of The Lightning Thief, the story begins with Percy, our main character, and it's the last day of his school, and the school he goes to specifically is known to be for misfits. And Percy specifically has something called dyslexia. Dyslexia is a disorder which hinders specific cognition that we use. In the case of Percy, he has a hard time reading, for example, because words seem jumbled and things of that sort. But he's even a misfit by misfit standards. In the case of the beginning of the story, Percy doesn't really have any friends. His only real friend is this guy named Grover, who's 19, 20 years old, something like that. This guy failed like grade 6 30 times or some shit. And Percy is 12 years old at the beginning. So on the last day of school, this school of misfits goes to a museum, and at this museum they basically go around looking at a bunch of shit, as one does at a museum. Somewhere along the way, this one girl keeps nagging, her name's Nancy, this one girl named Nancy keeps nagging Percy and his boy Grover. Percy just pops off and just like calls her a bitch, and he gets in trouble for that. And because he gets in trouble, this math teacher pulls him to the back room. In the back room, suddenly this math teacher turns into a monster. Percy's confused as hell, but eventually, from running away from this monster, another teacher comes in called Mr. Burner. And Mr. Burner is the only teacher that Percy really likes. Mr. Burner throws him a pen, and the pen turns into a sword. Somehow he uses that sword to kill the math teacher, who turned into a monster. When he leaves the room, no one seems to remember that there even was a math teacher. It's like the math teacher didn't even really exist. Percy's confused and he doesn't really understand what's going on, but he feels suspicious when Grover, his boy, is starting to act strange. But anyway, he pays it no mind, though he's upset at it. Goes on to go home after his last day of school, and he goes home to a stepdad that he doesn't really mess with, as the traditional stepdads are. This guy is just a drunk that chills in his house and plays poker, and he's just not a good guy. But his mom, on the other hand, who goes by the name Sally Jackson, is a big part of Percy's life, and he loves her a lot, and it's very clear from the way he describes her. He describes her to be angelic and all this other stuff, so he really loves his mom. But his stepdad, on the other hand, is complete. Sally says that they're gonna go to a beach house to celebrate his graduation, and so they go. But on the way there, he decides to tell her that the math teacher turned into a monster. No one really believed him, but Sally believes him, and she explains that the next day they're gonna have to cut their trip short, and they're gonna have to go to a camp for the rest of the summer. And Percy's obviously pretty cheese, but he's confused, like, what's going on. So the next day comes. Grover, his 20-year-old boy who got left back like 30 times or whatever, he shows up at the beach house that they're at, and he's confused too that Grover somehow knows his mom, Sally. So he's like, what the hell is going on? But they promise they're gonna explain it when they get to this camp. So they're driving to this camp, but on the way there, a monster pops out of nowhere. A monster by the name of the Minotaur. The Minotaur, whatever the hell they call this thing. It's like in Greek mythology, it's that it's like it's like a bull. Has like horns and shit. And the bull basically flips the car over and turns the mom into dust. Percy, in a fit of rage, somehow manages to kill this Minotaur. This bull. Fuck. He passes out right after. And he wakes up in this room that he doesn't know anything about. He sees a girl that he doesn't recognize taking care of him, and he passes out again, thinking that his mom's dead. When he finally fully wakes up, he wakes up in this camp known as Camp Half-Blood. And at this camp, it's basically used for demigods. So children of the gods of Greek mythology. Greek gods somehow bang random people and have kids, and those kids become demigods. Percy himself is a demigod, but his father isn't his real father, not his stepdad. His real father is not really known. He gets given a tour of this place. There's different dorm rooms, cabins, whatever, for each different god. And it's like a very, very expansive place. He ends up being assigned to cabin 13, which is run by some guy named Luke. Luke is this guy who takes care of the kids that aren't really claimed, that are quote-unquote abandoned by their real parents. Percy's in that room. On his first day there, he hears people crying because, you know, their parents aren't really there. Percy himself is one of those people that don't have his parents there. His mom is now gone, and his alleged real dad isn't anywhere. He doesn't know anything about this real dad. But he'll only spend that first day there because the next day his real father claims him. And it turns out that he's the son of Poseidon, the Greek god for the ocean, the water. And that makes him kind of a really interesting person because in this world, the three main Greek gods aren't allowed to have children anymore. Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. So that means Percy himself is a proof that a Greek god broke the rules. One of the three main Greek gods broke the rules. And the reason why this rule exists is because, according to lore of this world, which is our real world, World War II happened because of these three gods. So Percy's not supposed to have even been born. And what makes things worse is that suddenly his birth, because he exists, he's being accused of stealing Zeus's lightning bolt. Zeus being the god of lightning. Because he's being accused of it, he has to somehow prove his innocence. And he's assigned to a quest where he needs to find the real person that stole the lightning bolt. So he decides to go on this quest with Grover, his 20-year-old boy that got left back 8 years. Which turns out this guy is actually a centaur. And centaurs are basically half... I'm gonna fuck this up. He's half goat, half human. Whatever, he's half goat, half... And they're assigned to taking care of these demigods. And Percy was the demigod he was assigned. So that's the first person he takes with. And the second person he brings along is this girl named Annabeth. And Annabeth is the girl that was taking care of him when he first woke up. She's the daughter of Athena, which is the goddess of wisdom. The reason why only 3 people are going on this quest is because there's some sort of rule of 3. And if you go with more than 3 people on a quest, you're only going to come back with 3 people, if at all. So Percy goes to prove his innocence. And that's where the intro concludes. So, the introduction is actually really good. I actually really like this introduction because in such a short period of time, you know a lot and a lot happens. It's a very simple intro. Like, so much happens in such a short period of time, and by the end of it, you know everything that needs to happen. The actual introduction that I introduced ends at like chapter 7 or 8. And by then, you know everything. You know what you have to do. You know what Percy's like. You know his friends, etc. Because of that, the intro does what it was supposed to do. You care about the characters, you know their goals, and that's all you need. So I think if I were to give the intro a grade, I'd probably give it somewhere on the 7.5 scale. Because it did everything right, there wasn't anything short of it, and you're interested by the end of it. I think where it kind of missed some beats is with the mom, personally. I feel like there could have been more to show with the mom before the mom dies to make it more emotional. But still, from what it was good at what it did. So with the characters, there's 3 main characters that we have. Percy, Annabeth, and Grover, the 3 people that go on this quest. Now Percy is extremely likable. It's hard to dislike this kid. He's got just so much personality. And because the story is written in first person, you see so much of that personality. Like when he defends Grover from that annoying ass chick earlier on in the story, his internal dialogue is just hilarious to look at, from the beginning all the way to the end. And you care about him because he's a kid going through some shit. And that's just like the way things are. When a kid goes through some shit, people automatically start to care. Percy's one of those kids, and because he's so likable, you care about him so much. And that care only is magnified throughout the story because he starts to get so much more depth later on. Just in this first book specifically, I didn't really feel like there was too much depth to him. Now bear in mind, this is a children's book, so I wouldn't expect more than that. But there's just not enough depth to him right now. But that's only going to be right now. The depth to him comes in the later books. But someone who does have depth is Annabeth, the other girl, who goes on this quest with him. Now she's the goddess of Athena's daughter, so she's supposed to be intelligent. What makes her so deep or like layered is that she has a history. Percy, that's why I didn't really like feel Percy too much. I mean, I felt him, but like I just didn't feel him as much as I messed with Annabeth. Annabeth has a past, and what Annabeth's past is that before she came to Camp Half-Blood, which, like I explained earlier, is this camp for these demigods that were abandoned, she actually lived with her dad. She grew up with her dad, but the thing is, with her dad and with these people that I guess bang gods or whatever, they are always unique people. Sally, Percy's mom, was a unique person, and Annabeth's dad is a unique person. But the thing is, with Annabeth's dad, the dad remarried, and just like Percy, there's another parent there. And ever since the dad remarried, he had 2 other kids, and those 2 other kids she always felt like got more of the attention in the house. So she always had like a bit of resentment towards her own father. But fast forward, later on, she decides to run away from home because of a bunch of events that happen. They run away with the help of Grover, which I said earlier is a centaur, and centaurs are used to escort these kids to the camp. On the way there, Thalia, their other friend, died. So she lost a friend, and her dad kind of abandoned her. In her head, she's already got like a lot of pain up till this point, and that explains a lot of her choices throughout the story. Now, Grover, the third character, is just kind of a comic relief character for the first book. Like, throughout the story, he just does things that are just hilarious. But that doesn't mean he's not a layered character. It's just that, like Percy, his layers aren't shown in the first book as much. The only thing that's really layered to him is that he feels responsible for Annabeth's friend dying earlier on in the story. Grover's just a funny ass character. That's just all there is to it. And so those are the 3 main characters, and I think the best character, as you can tell, to me, is Annabeth. Just the layers that she has, and that there's just so much to her, and that only expands later on. So Annabeth is the best character, but despite that, there's no characters I dislike. Every character in the story so far is likable. Personally, I just really like having layers to characters, and those layers just aren't really shown in the first book. And again, bear in mind, it still is a children's book. I think characters overall, I'd give it like an 8 out of 10. There's nothing I disliked, but there could be more that I would have liked to see. But that changes, again, as the story goes on. The best scene of the first book isn't really distinct. I didn't really like, there wasn't a scene that stood out to me. Like I mentioned earlier, there wasn't that much emotional depth in these scenes. The 2 scenes that I can say could have been my favorite scenes but weren't were when Percy finally meets his father for the first time, his real dad, Poseidon. It just seemed like it was too short, and there wasn't any like emotional, banger to it. It was just he sees his dad, and then I don't know, I just feel like the emotion wasn't really there. And the other scene was when Percy's mourning for his mom when he spends the first night in the dorms. I just feel like there just wasn't enough emotional expression to me. If I were to give a scene the best scene, it would actually be a concept. I actually really like a concept that's mentioned later on, which is this casino. And in the casino, you spend whatever amount of time you spend there is amplified in the real world. The reason why I like this so much, first off, the concept is beautiful. But even more than that, it adds tension to the story, because you think Percy has all this time to find out who really did steal the lightning bolt, but because they go into this casino for like an hour, their time's like cut into 1 day. And so they need to find who this person was by the end of this day. So tension is really amplified because of that. But overall, I just didn't feel like there was a scene that really, got you. But that doesn't mean that concept was bad. But I think that if I were to give a rating for this, the best scene, quote unquote, which isn't really there, it would be like a 6 out of 10. Maybe even a 5 out of 10. I think I'll just go in the middle and just say 5.5. I feel like that best scene needed to be there, and I just didn't really feel like I found that in the first book. The overall plot I mentioned in the best scene, I didn't really like that there wasn't enough, emotional depth in certain scenes, but that doesn't mean the plot itself was bad. Again, I just feel like the plot became formulaic after a while, where any sort of Greek god or Greek problem that people face could be filled within these things. So for example, the first Greek problem he faces is Medusa, or Greek monster. After he goes on his quest is Medusa. There wasn't much significance in why Medusa popped up in this. Bear in mind, it made a lot of sense in the context of the story, but I just feel like anything could have filled these pages. Any other Greek monster or Greek problem that they face could have filled these pages. And that the journey itself, there wasn't enough significance in what they go through. But again, that doesn't mean it was bad. I feel like there was a lack of significance in why Medusa was here, or why this was there. It just that this happens, and then we get to here. So I think the overall plot, I would give like a 7, but that doesn't mean it's bad. I feel like there wasn't enough significance in why these things happen. So yeah, I would probably give it like a 7 out of 10. Now for the conclusion, I'm basically talking about why I feel like if it did a good job, it got you interested enough to want to read the next books. That's if it's a series, but if it's a standalone, I'm talking about if the conclusion itself, was well-rounded. Did it tie up every loose end in the story? But because this is a series, I'm talking about whether it did a good enough job to make you want to know what the next... And that's exactly what Percy Jackson did in The Lightning Thief. The conclusion ends on who the Lightning Thief really is. It's a twist that's good enough to make you want to know what's next. You really have to find out why this person did what they did, or what they are going to do. Why did they steal it? It's like a lot of questions are solved in the conclusion, which I think is actually a really good thing, because you need to know what happened. You need to know why this person did it, etc., etc. So I think the conclusion itself was enough to keep you interested to want to read the next books, and that's why I'd give the conclusion an 8 out of 10. It's an 8 out of 10 and not any higher than that, because I feel like a perfect ending would have ended on a bit more of a tense event happening. Like for example, maybe someone could have died, or some sort of significant weight that the ending makes you go like, holy shit, like I just gotta keep going. Ending on like a big event would have made this go from an 8 to a 10, but this ending just reveals on a reveal. That's why I gave it an 8 and not higher, but that doesn't mean it's a bad ending. It's pretty good. 8 out of 10's pretty significant. First episode of this series, which is going to compare Harry and Percy. Next Monday I'm going to be looking at the Philosopher's Stone, or Sorcerer's Stone, whatever you call it, and then the week after that I'll be comparing the Lightning Thief to the Philosopher's Stone.